And we are live for anybody who caught that. And I'm delighted to say, with me today is my guest, Marek. We're just practicing this. Zmyslowski.
It's a great icebreaker, isn't it?
Marek Zmyslowski, who is an entrepreneur and an author of the book, the fantastic book, I must say, Chasing Black Unicorns, How Building the Amazon of Africa Put Me on Interpol's Most Wanted List. Marek, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Richard. Pleasure to be here.
From Barcelona, am I right?
Yeah, that's where I'm based right now, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so where do I start with this book, Marek? I mean, it's like an odyssey. I mean, it was extraordinary, right? From Polish mafia to building this huge platform, internet platform in Nigeria, to as the subtitle of the book says, ending up on Interpol's Most Wanted list. I mean, yeah, you tell me, where shall we start this story, Marek?
Yeah, that was the thing which kind of led me to write the book, because at some point you realize that the personality type that you have and the countries you used to live in and the business I was involved in kind of were giving me so many adventures that I'm either extremely lucky, and this is why everything is so crazy and interesting, but if I run out of luck, at some point I might die, so I had to write this into the book. I remember someone actually told me this. So basically, for those who don't know the book, my story in 1 minute is that I'm born and raised Polish. I did my first business initiatives in the early days of the Polish financial markets, the early 2000s. That wasn't the early capitalism, but it was still pretty early. Before we made some big money doing financial investments. That was before Lehman Brothers, and then we lost all the money. But then I kind of jumped on the wagon of startups, Silicon Valley, a lot of money from VCs, and I was kind of able to get back on the feet and make some money again in this business. But because I was doing technology businesses in very strange sectors like funeral business, I unfortunately had as my competition people that were basically pretty shady characters. But then I kind of fell in love with this crazy chaotic sectors when you want to disrupt something and bring technology, which is what led me then to Sub-Saharan Africa and building e-commerce businesses in Nigeria. And then again, having extremely positive adventures like doing an IPO with one of the companies I helped build. But at the same time, being wanted by the Nigerian police for 2 years and almost ended up in jail for 20 years, just because someone bribed the police, because that's the strategy to get rid of someone. That is your business partner, that you just don't need him anymore. So I just realized that at some point, I want to share my story because there are a lot of business insights, both from the early days in Poland, Eastern Europe, and in Africa, because not too many people do what I'm doing, which is technology businesses in those markets. But at the same time, those adventures are entertaining in a way. So I figured if I combine my biography with some business knowledge, I make a business book which is easier to consume because you also have those stories in between. And that's basically what my idea behind this book was. And you be the judge if I was able to kind of balance the adventure part with the business insight part. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, it's rock and roll. I mean, it could, it's as entertaining as any sort of rock star biography. I mean, it really was. It was just extraordinary. I mean, I've got 3 kids right now. 2 kids, both 3. So by sleep, I'm generally sleep deprived. So I'm trying to get into bed at like 8:30 every night. Like I'm trying to race to get into bed to see if I can get some semblance of sleep before the kids wake up.
I feel so
but
bad
I was up, like reading your book. Like, no, Marek, I need to sleep. But it really was very compelling read.
Thanks so much. I had this actually issue because when I decided to first publish in Polish, because Poland is a very small market, so I figured let me publish in Poland, see what the feedback of the book is before I'm going to publish this in the US or UK and so on. And I decided to go after the very biggest publisher I was able to find in Poland, because I knew that people will actually not believe that this is the story based on facts because of all those crazy amount of things that happened to me in the last 15 years, really, in Nigeria, in Poland, and in Kenya, and so on. So I was lucky enough to get on board the biggest publisher in Poland, and one of the oldest ones, and they kind of audited me to see if I was really on Interpol, if I really want the case against the police, if everything that I'm writing about is actually the truth, because they were risking publishing my book as nonfiction and then being accused of this just being a pure fiction. So yeah, I know what you mean.
Right, and I even saw on the internet, because I was researching around it a little bit. There are still a few dissidents out there, right? Who are still claiming that it's all exaggerated and it's not true, and Marek's just bullshitting. So it's still like you still got this the detractors out there, right?
Yes, and that's actually part of my book as well, which I think is now relevant from a totally different angle with all the Black Lives Movement and everything that is happening in the States. The racial tensions are extremely strong everywhere. They're just not visible always. And the problem I had, and I'm not putting myself here as a victim, because I'm not a victim. I'm just telling the type of challenges that I had faced in Nigeria in 2012, is that, besides us, me and an investment fund that invested in us from Germany, Rocket Internet, building one of the early e-commerce groups in Nigeria, in sub-Saharan Africa, we had a lot of jealousy and hatred from the local Nigerian entrepreneurs, because clearly they didn't have the access to the capital we were able to have. Because if you were a local entrepreneur from Nigeria in 2012, you had no chance of getting money from a VC from Europe, because they wouldn't just trust you. But here you see those white guys, those European boys, coming with millions of euros, because they were able to raise in Germany or in Switzerland, and building an e-commerce group on their soil in a way. So you see a lot of similarities with the old colonialism, right? And it's not like we took their chances, because they had no chance to get the money from those VCs. But then after a couple of years, the people that used to work for us, they were able to get some background experience and then raise money. We've educated the market, and those people in the end were also able to raise money from investors. But my point is that we had a lot of hatred from the local guys, because in a way we were privileged. And that is absolutely true, because this is how capitalism works. So what happened is, when I had to take my story public, because I had this big problem with Nigerian corruption, police, the court was involved, my court papers were missing. I had to take this to the press to put pressure on Interpol, on the global police, because Interpol doesn't like bad press. And once I got the press on me, Interpol finally started to look at my case to see what is happening to this guy in Nigeria. Why is he, going so loud and attacking the police in Nigeria? A lot of people that never were really liking what we were doing in the region kind of jumped on the wagon with those bad guys, because it was convenient for them. Oh, there's this guy that I never liked because he's this white privileged dude. He's involved in something. So it's convenient for me to kind of accuse him, because it fits my emotional position towards this case already. And I have to say, it was a very, very painful process for me to deal with all those haters that felt convenient, comfortable to accuse me of being actually the bad guy in the whole case, because they had some different emotional motivations towards me that came from my early days in Nigeria, as I already explained you, which were related to the history between Europe and Africa, and the color of my skin. So again, this is not putting myself as a victim here, because I was taking advantage of the privilege, whether I like it or not, but to put these things into the context. So I got a lot of hate for even bringing the thing up from Nigeria, because people were saying, how dare you? You've made money in Nigeria, you've built this company, and now you're going public and telling the whole world that you are a victim of corruption. Why would you do this to the country that gave you so much? And my defense was, I'm not attacking people, I'm attacking the problem in the system. Like, if we don't analyze the problem, we would never fix it. Like, this is unfortunately the painful truth. Nigeria is one of the most corrupt countries in the world when you look at statistics. And I'm not saying this because I hate it. I still love Nigeria nevertheless, and I'm so thankful to it. But we need to point out the problems, right?
Right. And as you point out in the book, it was Nigerians who helped you fight the corrupt system, right? To clear your name.
Yeah, that's the irony of the story. it was also the best proof of all those haters. They just don't read what I'm writing. They don't watch what I'm talking on conferences, on TEDx, etc. I keep repeating that I actually consider myself as a very lucky man, because for so many years, and I've been doing business in Nigeria for the last 8 years, this was only that once where I became a victim of corruption. And I could have been victim so many times. It was painful, but only once. And the people that were really involved in this whole blackmail against me were not really Nigerians. They were just Indians and a guy from Ethiopia with American passport that just took advantage of the system in Nigeria. And if it wasn't for the Nigerian lawyer that I had, those Nigerian friends that I had, and in the end, Nigerian federal court that have ruled that police in Nigeria was corrupt in my particular case, I would never be able to speak to you. So the moral of my story is actually the opposite of, people that were accusing me of, which is also why I wrote the book, because I wanted this to be documented, because it's not an easy thing, because the longer ago it was from now, the easier it is to break it down into one sentence and then kind of miss the whole point.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's worth just unpacking a little bit that whole scenario. We've sort of, we've cut straight to the punchline, really. But just,
the point,
just to give people a bit of the background. So how you just take us through the sequence of steps that had you, I guess, first moved to Nigeria. Let's set a bit of context from Poland, and then the steps that led up to you being on this list. I mean, I know that's in a sense, a big chunk of the book, but in a few minutes.
Of course. So, long story short, I was in my early 20s. I was this typical startup guy. I dropped out of university at the first year because I wanted to be like Bill Gates and Zuckerberg. And only after some couple of years, you realize that it's actually against the probability of being in any way successful if you drop out of university. But it's not what you read in the press. And I had a couple of smaller and bigger successes in Poland with startups. I was able to sell one company. But at some point, I've realized that I kind of hit the ceiling, that I can't build this company beyond $1 million revenue per year. Because, first of all, I never had any educational background because I dropped out of university. And I never really worked for anyone. Most of the companies I worked for were actually the companies I also founded. So how could I gain any background? And I decided at some point that I need to take a step back in order then to do a couple steps forward. And if you want to be an amazing manager, you probably want to graduate from Harvard and then work for McKinsey and then go to a multinational. But if you want to be a great entrepreneur, especially in the online space, you want to work for guys like Google, Amazon, Alibaba, at least for some time, and then do something on your own. And Rocket Internet is like the Amazon of Europe or Alibaba of Europe. It's one of the biggest e-commerce companies in the world. They are already in more than 40 countries. They have different brands. A lot of people, young people that want to be in the online business, want to work for them at least for a year or two. And I was one of them. And unlike any other candidate that is, post-Harvard that wants to work for Rocket, I had experience from Poland. I already did something. And I just wanted to work for them. And I said, just hire me. I will do anything. And I was just extremely lucky that they said, everyone we want to hire, no one wants to go to Nigeria now to open this e-commerce business with us. They wanted to open e-commerce, online travel, and a couple of other verticals. They said, we're going to hire you for very small amount of salary, but if you build the company together with us from scratch, after 3 years, you will earn your shares. So in a way, they were building the company and hiring another co-founder to it, like a manager that earns his shares instead of a salary, so he's more motivated. And there was 7 of us. They opened 7 verticals. I was responsible for online travel. And that's how they sent me to Nigeria. And at that time, I just wanted to work for Rocket Internet. I didn't care where it's going to be. All I knew about Nigeria was that it was Boko Haram, 419 frauds, and that, the British colonized Nigeria in a very bad way. They actually colonized, whole Africa, almost whole Africa. Then they decolonized, divided it into some fake countries, created in an artificial way, and then left it in the very worst state. So I was a total ignorant in terms of, what this amazing continent really represents. I just wanted to work for Rocket Internet. And what was supposed to be a 2 years adventure, just to learn something and come back, basically changed my life. And it's been 8 years. I left then after some time, after, doing the IPO, getting my shares, opening other companies. And and I've been still doing it. It's not only Nigeria now; it's also Kenya and South Africa. But it really shaped my interest, both geographically and sector-wise.
Right.
So that was the first stage of Nigeria, meaning why I went there, which was working for Rocket Internet. And I guess the missing point is now how I ended up on Interpol most of the list. So
and to get to 2 years in was pretty extraordinary, because I think in the book most people are gone within a year, right? From Europe who go to work in Nigeria at Rocket, right?
Oh yeah, so that was another funny story, that after working a year for them, I was already, the oldest there. Like, no one has worked longer, which was crazy. Which tells many things, like maybe the recruitment wasn't done in the best way, and so on. And also, it wasn't the easiest market to work in, at least then. And 3 years forward, when I decided, okay, I think I've learned my lessons. Deep inside, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not a manager for a bigger company. I earned everything I wanted to earn. I fell in love with the region. Let me open a company this time on my own, where I'm my own boss, and maybe find some local business partners to do this with me. And especially when you want to open a business in an exotic country, the common knowledge is that you need to find a strong local partner to kind of, warn you from doing stupid things, warn you from the bad guys, and so on. Again, big problem with corruption. Everyone tells you want to have some protection from the bad guys when they go after you. No one tells you is that sometimes when you choose the local partner in a bad way, he turns out to be the bad guy. But long story short, we've been running the new company, which was a software for hotels, for around a year and a half. And what started as a very normal conflict inside the company management board about, the strategy of growth, fundraising, and so on. Because like in every startup, we had a lot of problems and a lot of conflict. It's typical. What has started like a conflict has really escalated to a real fight to who's going to kick out whom from the company. So my business partner basically went behind my back to all the shareholders and tried to convince them to kick me out from the company, and instead they will get more power. What he didn't assume is that they will actually all turn to support me and my vision of the company, and I actually did to him what he tried to do to me. So we basically voted him out of the company, which was the first time and the last time when he kind of tried to get rid of me from the company in a legal way. It's, you can talk whether this is nice or an asshole move, but it's within the law about, the war for power in the company. And that's how he underestimated me back then. How I underestimated him afterwards is that for him, the options of getting rid of me haven't finished yet, because he had this whole arsenal of other very successful tactics that work well in Nigeria. And one of them is basically buying an arrest warrant that basically locks you from anything. I wasn't able to travel anywhere. I was supposed to be moved to a Nigerian police station and then to jail the moment they catch me. And all my bank accounts were frozen. And the moment everything happened, I got a phone call saying, if I'm going to do what I was asked to in the very beginning, everything will disappear in a way. So basically, your whole movement, your freedom is blocked until you give back your company. And for someone doing business in Nigeria for 40 years, like my local business partner did, this is just one of very many strategies that you can do, which for me was extremely new. However, I wouldn't say brave enough. I was stubborn enough, and I was driven by revenge at the very beginning to fight this case the proper way and still show him that I will not be essentially blackmailed. And 2 years down the line, the whole drama happened. I ended up being on Interpol most wanted list. We can talk about how Interpol works and why it's so easy to put someone there and how hard it is to take you down. A lot of court cases in 3 different law structures, because I had to have a court case in Poland, in France, in Nigeria. I won it all. I spent more money than the company was valued at the very end, because obviously the conflict between the co-founders destroyed the company almost, but learned a lot in the meantime. Financially, it wasn't the right decision. Financially, if I just did what they wanted me to do, I would be better off. But I guess at some point it wasn't about money anymore.
And tell us about the moment you get arrested, and just to take us through that, and how the decision that you made before that meant that you got arrested in Poland, unfortunately, right?
It's one of the craziest stories of my life. I was in Nigeria, and that was just after I've met my girlfriend, and it was that very early stage of our relationship. I think I just visited her in Dominican Republic that year, and then the Christmas was coming, and she was never in Nigeria before because we met in South Africa, and I wanted her
at a Miss World, Team Miss World party.
Yeah, right? I met her at the Miss World party, which is another like James Bond style adventure. Yeah. And I
slip that in.
I wanted her to visit me in Nigeria because it's not everyone gets to see Christmas in Nigeria. But then what she said, maybe you will come again for Christmas and you will meet my family. So I was like, ooh, this relationship is getting on another level. And what was so cute back then really turned out to be a life-saving experience for me, because we went for Christmas to Dominican Republic, then we went to Barcelona for New Year's Eve, and then just after New Year's Eve we went to Poland to also meet my family. And I was supposed to be in Nigeria for Christmas and New Year's Eve, and I changed my plans last minute. No one really knew about this. And on my flight from Warsaw to London, I think I was flying then, I was stopped at the airport in Poland, and that's where I realized that there was an arrest warrant which was put in the system a couple days before Christmas, and that's where I was supposed to be arrested in Nigeria. They just didn't find me there because I left without telling anyone, which was another crazy story for people saying that I knew about it and this is why I ran away, which was crazy. But I understand that someone wants to say it. But because my girlfriend told me to visit her, to meet her family, I changed my last minute plans, and I wasn't arrested in Nigeria. Because if I was arrested in Nigeria, what would happen to me was very obvious. They would take me to jail, and they would keep me there for as long as it was needed for me to sign the papers they were giving me to sign. And I'm not a tough guy. I would sign this the first day they would give me there. I wouldn't. No amount of money is worth my health and stress. So that would be a done deal. But because I was in Poland when this whole thing happened, I felt confident enough that I may be able to fight this case from Poland as long as I won't be extradited. So what then happened for the next 2 years, and I don't want to give out too much from the book, but as you know, there was police involved. I would have phone conversations, they would be recorded. I would have a meeting, and I would go to the meeting with a microphone under my shirt because we were collecting evidence of the blackmail and corruption. But the fact of me being in Poland gave me confidence that I may be able to fight this remotely, as long as they won't win a case to extradite me from Poland. And this is why I had to have a case in Poland separately to a case in France in Nigeria, because I had to convince the Polish court that the Polish government shouldn't send me to Nigeria because it's all one big hoax. Yeah, a lot of things to unpack there.
Yeah, but it's your resilience. I mean, that's what comes through in terms of a character trait. That part of the Marek character seems to me is this sort of extraordinary resilience, right? To put up with the stress, and and I know your health suffered at times, and it seems like you had it pretty rough at times, but that seemed to be strong in you. Is that right?
Yeah, which is why the first 2 chapters of my book really tell about my story as a teenager, really, because now looking at everything from hindsight, I was this typical, bullied fat kid from those Hollywood movies where you have those, sexy girls, then the popular football playing guys, and then those geeks and nerds. So I was that typical geek and nerd. The only way for me to talk to a girl was when I was giving her my homework from maths. That couple of years of being bullied in high school really built this internal need to have to prove to everyone around me that I am worth something, because I had huge, what's the word, self-assessment problems. You know what I mean?
Self-esteem, yeah.
Self-esteem problems, which then turned to be an extremely powerful tool in business. because if you're really motivated to prove everyone around you, the business rewards you. You have a personality issue that is rewarded if it gets deeper, yeah, because you make money just by showing off. And in financial sectors, I was in this whole subculture of investment brokers, financial advisors, insurance agents. It was all about who's gonna buy a new car and a more expensive suit. So it was all that external validation, which was in short term very powerful success tool, but it can destroy you in the long term. So unless you know how to channel that energy, and even till today, which was proven with the whole Interpol case and the Nigeria corruption case, is that the harder it gets, the more I have this internal, I call it the positive irritation or the positive rage. That is not really it's a positive rage that gives me really energy and focus to operate and defend and do something. Because there's also this type of rage that kind of makes you chaotic and you don't do anything. You just kind of burn yourself inside. But I have this thing that the worse it gets, the more survival instinct I have. I actually have more problems to motivate myself when everything goes okay. When I kind of reach the security level, the satisfaction level, business is doing great. I just got myself a new bike or whatever, and everything's great. And I'm like, okay, now what? Now I feel demotivated, and I want to lie and watch Netflix for a day. So I guess it just works the other way.
Yeah, that's interesting. And on this show, we've interviewed plenty of therapists, and I've done a lot of my own work. And something that emerges for me as I say that is that there's this need we sometimes have to recreate the conditions of our early trauma in order to resolve it, right? So we're constantly trying to recreate those scenarios for us to resolve it.
Yeah, that's like prolonged exposure or something, yeah?
Mm.
When you kind of think about something over and over again until it just becomes more normal. There must be something in it. What really helped me also, while we're discussing this, I remember that night I spent in jail when I was arrested. I couldn't speak to my lawyer. I was only able to make one phone call, and then they took my phone. And when they kept me in the cell for one night, because they told me that most likely tomorrow there will be a decision to send you to Nigeria. That was in Poland, and I spent one night in jail, being offline and thinking, okay, this is it. And I went through those like accelerated stages of grief, right? From I can't believe what is happening to extreme anger, I'm gonna kill everyone that did this to me, to my life is over. And after I cried my eyes out and prayed to every god I was able ever to remember, that's where you start kind of peacefully thinking about, okay, what's going to happen? And I played in my head the best possible scenario and the worst possible scenario over and over again until I'm like, okay, I already know what's going to happen from worst to best. I'm just waiting for the morning to realize what options is going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, that we do have this inbuilt ability to process extreme emotion. It's called the grieving process, right? Yeah. But we kind of reserve it in our lives for, I don't know, the loss of a loved one. It's sort of, it's somehow we don't acknowledge it as a tool that's available, so we can use all the time, right? Both to grieve stuff from our past, or as in that case, your present moment experience of, being in a jail cell and so on. I think that's it's a very important point, actually. Yeah.
Correct. This one and what I do remember is what really helped me, and I'm using this still today, is breathing exercise. It's just amazing how you can control your whole body just by controlling the breath. There's a reason why when women give birth, the breath control is so important. Just in every movie you watch, it's like breathe. And there is something extremely powerful in it. By controlling your breath, you can really calm yourself down or focus and so on.
Yeah, I find that with my toddlers as well when they're really kicking. Like if I could, well, we have the expression in English. I don't know if you in Polish, but we have this expression. I didn't get a chance to catch my breath today, right? This idea of catching our breath, right?
And catch my breath,
yeah. Can we catch our breath? Can we just get conscious and present to our breathing? It's so important. That's right.
Yeah, there's something to it. That's for sure. Yeah,
I got that. So there were two places I thought we might want to go with this conversation outside of the rock and roll tale that might be interesting for the audience, and one was around managing and leading, software teams, which obviously you've done quite a lot of, and we do have quite a big chunk of the audience are involved in building software, managing, leading, or writing it. And the other part was the sort of the capitalism, the state of capitalism. It seems like you've had one experience of sort of capitalism, I suppose, at the sharp end. And it would be good, especially right now with where we're at, I suppose, in society, sort of zooming out a bit, what role is capitalism playing in what we're currently seeing in the world? But so I thought maybe start with the practical and on the software, and then sort of zoom out a bit. So what have you learned about leading software teams and building sort of products and taking them to market?
Yeah, so I think I'm at the stage. You're probably familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? When in the beginning. So I'm going down the valley of death now. So with every bit of information I learn, I realize how little I have ever known. So that's where I am right now, both in terms of understanding, especially in terms of understanding the world around me. Lately, with everything that's been happening, COVID, Black Lives Matter, so much social tensions, I was able to learn living in Nigeria and then South Africa, one of the most complicated societies in the world. Because for me, it was all a shock coming out from a very homogenic country of Poland. We had our own share of problems, but for us, it was always black and white. We were the good ones. The Germans were attacking us. We were the good ones. The Russians were attacking us. That was so black and white. And then you realize when you move out to the other parts of the world how gray everything is. Yeah. But anyway, for me, capitalism was always this compromise between your personal satisfaction and also actually working in the favor of the society around you. Obviously, capitalism has a lot of negative effects, especially when it's kind of getting out of proportion. We're talking about, multi-corporations were not thought of when Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of the Nations and so on. The disaster of ecology was not thought of. I guess it's a side effect of capitalism you have to get rid of. But for me, I really love the idea of, especially in Africa, when you see that. And again, I was called a white savior for saying this. I just love the fact that in Nigeria, I was able to build a software company, and I would hire 20 guys. It's easy to really teach someone coding and programming. It's not as hard as people think. And then after 4 years, they obviously leave my company because they go somewhere else. Some of them open their own startup. Some of them open their own agency. And they tell you, if it wasn't for you, I would probably have a car shop, or I would probably sell fruits on the street. And that's extremely rewarding, because in Europe, I would probably be able to build another mobile app for millennials, another TikTok. So you see in front of your eyes that there's this positive effect of your business, because you're not adding to the multinational, another billion of revenue. You're just building real business, solving real problems of real people, and then giving employment. And I think that's the most beautiful part of capitalism at the small level. So that's what was always so captivating for me in frontier markets, because you visibly see the impact of your business on the people around you, on the community, and that's really that romantic part of the capitalism. And so that's why I get this. That's how I see. I mean, I really like that small capitalism, the real one. But you were asking about managing the teams. There's this stage. I think it's you reach that stage when you have around 20 people, 20 engineers, when you don't have control anymore, you have influence. And it's the most challenging part for every manager is to switch from someone that is micromanaging everything, and the efficiency of the team is just the extension of your own efficiency, because you can still micromanage everything, to then scaling up from those 20 people in your team, whether this is engineers or coders or marketers. It's just, you can't directly manage more than 20 people, maybe 30 if you're talented, or 40. And the scale of the quality of a manager is really shown how things perform after they break, they go beyond the threshold of being able to micromanage everyone and remember everyone's name. And that was always the biggest challenge for me. to be honest,
and
when you're
what
running online businesses in the regions like Poland, I think I lost you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So what is it that what shift did you have to make in your own style of leadership or the way you managed to go from that sort of 20 people plus? You know, what did you have to adjust in yourself?
Oh, you pay way more attention to who you hire, because when you are micromanaging everyone, you just want loyal people that do exactly what you tell them to do. And then you just realize once you have 20 people, everything goes okay, and then suddenly you go from 20 to 40, you lose control whether you like it or not, and suddenly everything falls apart. Your whole team stops performing at all. Your whole organization goes into bust. And that's just because you were hiring people that were only able to do exactly what you told them to do. And the moment you stopped having control, you just gave them more independence, everything collapsed. So you have to go back and start hiring people all over again. So the biggest lesson for me was how important it is to take your time to hire the right people, because at some point, it's like with your kids, yeah? I mean, you can't go with them to school every day. You're gonna have to let them have your own life. So I always thought that recruitment is so easy that I will speak to you for 5 minutes. I already know who you are. And the more I work with people, the more I realize how much more time you need to really understand whether the person is good fit for your team or not. There are still patterns in personalities, of course, but it's not 50 of patterns. It's probably 500 or 5,000, and you can't just guess it so easily. So it's all about really trying to quantify personalities, then to build a team that you can just let go and let them run on your own.
Right. And I never thought of it like that, but I guess there's a probably bias within you as you build it. You don't want to hire people who are going to challenge you too much, because you've got a system that's working with you micromanaging everyone, right? You can kind of control it. And so you're probably going to not want to hire someone who's going to challenge that. But yeah, once you get over a certain time,
you hire weaker people. Because you don't want to spend energy on being challenged. Right? That's exactly the thing. But then you realize that this is actually what you need. There's this theory about diversity in the teams. When diversity in the team is not managed properly, it will destroy the team. But if the diversity in the team is managed properly, it will reach efficiency levels not available to homogenic teams, which are even managed by the best people ever. We just need to know how to deal with it. Yeah?
Right. And so that was the lesson. You learned to hire people who were prepared to challenge you, who could be leaders in their own right, I'm assuming.
Being ready is one. I guess it was very easy to be ready because it's great to have this, this thing in your head that, okay, these guys are actually smarter than me, and I can give them that I can trust them. That's okay. But finding those people, knowing how to find them and where to find them, that's the trickiest thing. And that was the issue with Nigeria, for example, because Nigeria has so much talent, so many talented people. There's, the whole country is like, more than 50% of the population is younger than 30 years old. And in terms of their IQ or motivation to work, extremely, they're all hustlers because they need to survive. And extremely, extremely talented people with a lot of talent for science as well, for those, coding skills. But you have to have proper training systems in order to turn those talented people into amazing coworkers. And then make sure that they stay with you, that the competition doesn't buy them out because you've spent all those, hundreds of thousands of dollars on training hundreds of people, and then suddenly they move to competition because you didn't pay attention to them and so on. So finding the right people and then making sure they don't leave. As cheesy as it sounds, it was the hardest part. But that's the thing about the business, yeah. I guess everyone knows what to do to run a successful business. The knowledge is out there, but if it was all about the knowledge, everyone would be a millionaire with a six-pack. Yeah? It's about sticking to those terms.
Yeah. And I suppose it's also, the other thing that we have a lot of as a big theme on this podcast is complexity, right? We've had a lot of complexity thinkers on the show, and And what they will say is it's leadership styles and techniques that are going to work are very context dependent, and they'll continue to emerge, right? They'll continue to evolve. What's needed of this complex adaptive system will continue to change. Yeah. And so returning to the capitalism question. So if then we've got this romantic notion of capitalism of small companies who are, I guess, serving their community. And there's no doubt that when these smaller companies have grown into the behemoths, like the Amazons and the Googles and so on, they provide enormous value to the world at large. But is the style of capitalism that allows for that a problem, do you think?
It is a big challenge because that's how you look at it. It enforces everyone to be ready for change, for constant change. Because, just like Gmail, replaced mail guys. Because Amazon is so huge, it can improve our lives by an order of magnitude in certain ways. What Amazon gives to us as a customer, it's just it's so amazing to live. It's so amazing to live now in the city with Uber and Amazon or for Uber Eats and so on. And no local player could really do that a couple of years ago. But now you kind of have to give space to Amazon to keep doing this because you can't compete with Amazon already at this stage. And I think that what really needs to be considered when you see all those big guys doing amazing things and improving our lives is that it always comes at a cost for the small guys, which is not necessarily bad, as long as the small guys are aware of this, that whatever opportunity they had for the last 10 years is not there anymore, and they need to be mobile also in pivoting their own business. Because I don't buy the argument of small local shop dying out because everyone wants to buy on Amazon. It's the customer's choice. But I want the small local shop not to be abused by Amazon. If the small local shop works with Amazon, that is bad. That is not the problem of the system itself. That is just the abuse of the system. And at the same time, I want the small local shop owner to be aware that what kept his business afloat for the last 20 years might not be the case anymore. The change is coming. That's not necessarily good for him personally. He has to find something else, but it has a greater aspect for the whole community because Amazon was able to do what he was not able to do. So, I always say everything has its good and bad sides. There's only avocado that makes everyone happy.
Right. Right. And so it sounds to me like there's something in there about not being sure that these behemoths don't abuse their position.
Yeah, which is where the government has to come in, that understands the dynamics of the society. The fact that we have law that was built 100 years ago that tries to control something built 5 years ago, that's a separate problem. Anti-monopoly regulations are not against capitalism. They're also actually supposed to support capitalism. So I guess it's a tricky thing. And then again, we're entering stages where the more books I read about, the more I realize how little I know. I guess there's always going to be a dynamic between the system being abused by the good guys and by the bad guys, and then you need the balance of power between the powerful corporations that do amazing stuff because they have the money and the ambition, the global ambitions, and at the same time having evenly powerful governments that are able to sometimes slow them down if one of the side goes too crazy, which goes also the other way, right? If you have governments of certain countries trying to do too much control over their citizens, then you have those multinational organizations, let's just say, Twitter or Facebook during the Arab Spring, that was able to counterbalance the force that was put on top of the citizens. So in a way, just like the balance of power in the last century between the West and the East was, besides Cold War, the balance of power is also good than having one guy that controls everything. I also see there's a lot of good potentially happening, that you have the balance of power between the private sector and equally strong governments, and then media somewhere in the background. Yeah? if they still exist.
Right. And that's so you're so what I'm interpreting here is that you're fairly relaxed with these corporations getting large. It's just that you feel like there ought to be a counterbalancing, equally sort of strong government to keep them in check, right?
My, romanticizing capitalist soul, being as naive as I am, I don't see the size as a problem in itself, because size, big giants are sometimes can, step on an ant without wanting to hurt it, can also do something bad, but can also, you know what I'm trying to say. Because we have those big companies, we can have them do things that no one else would be able to do. In the 60s, in the last century, only the United States and the Soviet Union were able to send people to the space, or they say.
Now that's another podcast.
Yeah, that's not open that. And now you can also have private corporations that can do that. And I believe that it's pretty healthy to have that competition on the very high level between multinationals having almost as much power as certain political organizations, because I think it's that type of competition they need in a way. Because the World Health Organization and United Nations were those attempts to kind of try to govern the whole world together, because we live in the times where we don't only have nationwide problems, we already have global scale problems, COVID, the climate change and so on, aliens maybe soon. But seems like these guys can't really find a common ground. So maybe they need some competition from the private sector, with all its bad and good aspects. I just see it like this: that additional complexity is not necessarily bad.
Right. Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. And because I came into, because I'm just, what comes to my mind is that we want to start to move away from that style of capitalism to something that's more purpose driven, that's less sort of singularly focused on growth and return for shareholders, and a kind of reform of the whole ethos of capitalism to something that looks a bit more like a world of B Corps, right?
Yeah.
Stuff. But I hadn't really. But yeah, I guess there is a loss in that potentially, that these very large behemoth organizations can do things like get us to the moon and achieve things that perhaps the smaller, as you say, romanticized version of capitalism might not achieve for us.
Correct, and I'm totally with you here. I'm really a fan of this new coined term, sustainable capitalism. When I see the four stakeholders of every business, you have the investors, you have the clients, you have the employees, and you have the planet Earth, and that's for me also as a stakeholder. I don't think this is impossible to build the big company that is also good. The reason why big companies right now are so damaging for the environment is because it was all about investors' value. Couple of percent up on NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange was more important than cutting those couple of thousands of square meters of trees somewhere in the Amazon, because it was so unrelatable, right? And obviously the money won. But if you build the consciousness of the negative aspects of both employees and clients and nature F, also in the investors, they will still allow your company to grow. They will still have a lot of faith in your company. They will still buy your stocks, even though you're not squeezing out 30% of revenue right now, because you have to go down to 20 to save some trees. And as long as the investors will be okay with it, you can get the best of both worlds. That's how I see it. As long as the clients will be aware where the revenue from the products you buy from, the companies which counterintuitively make less money because they have higher costs, because they pay more to protect the environment, those customers will benefit from getting more customers because they're aware of how this company operates. As naive as it is, I think it's worth trying out.
Yeah, and that actually really chimes with the recent guest, Tom Zaki, who's CEO of TerraCycle in the US, who are committed to a zero waste world, right? So we can recycle everything. But he says a couple of things which chime with what you said. One is he's had no problem attracting investors, right, as a company, and he's found people who are prepared to invest and put their capital with his company. And secondly, by taking this purpose-led approach to business, he actually has a negative marketing budget. So people actually come to him to give him PR, right? They come to him, they want to interview him, they want to get his story out into the press. So so there's a sort of paradoxical upside to putting stakeholders further down the list. Or sorry, shall I say shareholders further down the list?
Yeah, and I think the similar effect was, I think someone that really is doing this. Again, it comes from Silicon Valley, not because maybe they are the best guys in the world, but they have so much money they can afford it. So you have Marc Benioff, founder of Silicon Valley. I think I remember always him when I think about this term, sustainable capitalist. His last book was really about it, Trailblazer, where he just basically said, I'm okay making less money, quote unquote, because I'm giving back more to the employees or the environment, but this will actually allow me to make more money because that creates PR, marketing, people are coming back to me. The whole point of fair trade was about this, Maybe fair trade as a concept was not implemented in the best way because there's a lot of abuse. It was one of the early attempts to do that. And obviously it's not perfect, but that's the similar concept, you use the mechanism of the capitalism world, which are in many cases destroying us, like the attention to branding, but you make something good, a cool thing to do, and you're kind of using it in your own advantage. So I do believe that you can sort out a lot of problems with those tools. A lot of tools that are now destroying us can also be used to solve the problem. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and that's true. And there's no reason why organizations committed to that in that way can't become very large, right? And do great things in the world. It's not like it's a rule of nature that they can't get big. That's also true. And I think your point about environment is right, but I think increasingly the point about employees, I think we are seeing this big disparity in income inequality. I think is driving a lot of the issues that we're seeing right now in the world, and business has a role to play in that. We see the income disparities within businesses, right? I mean, the ratio between the average pay and CEO, for example, is extraordinary right now. So I think the environment includes treatment of other humans.
That's correct. There's a great book that recently came out called The Meaning Revolution, which kind of treats that that was the word, not the dissonance, discrepancy, the paradox of whether it's better to pay someone more, pay everyone the same thing. Are you rewarded just by your own work, or are you related by the work of someone else? I guess I don't see a problem with someone being rewarded 10 times more than the employee itself because of the amount of experience you have, responsibility, and so on. It's like in this joke, there was this team they were trying to fix a boat for 2 weeks and no one could do anything. And then they hired this old fisherman that was living there for 50 years. He came, he just, touched one thing, hit it once, the boat was working. And then he tells them, you have to pay me now $1,000. And they asking him, but you only worked for 1 minute for us. Yeah, but it took me 20 years to find out, what to hit. So as long as everyone is rewarded in its own way, that I am satisfied with what I'm doing, that's what I wanted to do. I find my meaning in doing my basic thing in this company. I'm not going to have a problem with the CEO making 100 times more than I do, because my satisfaction as an employee does not come from comparing myself with the CEO, but comparing myself with my own goals.
Right. That's a fascinating way. It's not just that I might be paid less that might cause resentment, because it may be that I've just not got any meaning in my work, right?
Yeah, correct. And that comparison to other people is so deeply embedded in us. There's this YouTube video where the monkeys were, I think, rewarded for doing something, and one monkey was getting a grape, and the other one was getting a cucumber. And at some point, the one that got the cucumber just said, "I'm not doing this thing anymore because I'm getting some shitty cucumber, while the other monkey is getting a grape." So even animals understand that difference in reward for doing the same action. But we have evolved since then, right? Because we need to understand that it's not comparing how many hours I spend every day in the office, but also what my goals are, what is my value to the company, and so on. Because otherwise, we would just end up with being extremely communist country, saying that everyone needs to get 1 apple per day and 1 piece of bread and 1 bottle of vodka per day, and we're all the same. And this is an extreme we don't want to go back again either. Yeah? I know something about this coming from a communist country, and I still remember stories of my parents and grandparents. Yeah?
No, well, I agree with that, and I still intuitively agree with that point. But what is interesting to me is that guy who runs the what is it? It's the financial company in the States, Gravity, right? When he's put all of his employees $70,000 a year, right? Everybody, including him, all the same salary, and everyone assumed this would be a sort of failure of trying to apply communism to the business world, and the business is thriving. Like 2 years later, they're doing fine. So there are some counterintuitive examples of where you just equalize pay and it still works. It's interesting.
Absolutely. I totally don't. It doesn't mean that giving everyone the same pay won't work. It can work. It can get everyone motivated. I guess you have to analyze it case by case. I just wouldn't say that you can't have an extremely satisfied employee in other situation than just being paid the same way as a CEO.
Yeah, that I think is right. Yeah, and I think your point about meaning is important one. Meaning, belonging.
Yeah, I don't know much about that company. I remember it was a payment solution. Yeah, and then the question is, how far you can go with such a business. Like how the employees are extremely happy. How has the company evolved? What were the goals, etc.? Can you build a business that is growing with such a business model? There was another one that did the same, which was Zappos, which had its time of fame many years ago, just before the purchase by Amazon. Then there was this book, Delivering Happiness, and then it kind of went sideways back then. They tried to even remove positions of people, and it just all turned out to be a mess. I guess there's just no one best way to do about it. There's just so many business models, so many teams, so many personalities. You can't have one size to fit it all.
No, I think that's right. I don't certainly agree with that. But I do think we need to start asking serious questions about how we the sort of rules of capitalism that we agree on, or at least our priorities for how we play the game of capitalism. I think that does need to change. Yeah.
So sorry, one technical thing, because I only had 1 hour for the podcast.
Yeah, sorry,
someone
I know
already
we've
scheduled
run over.
another podcast for the. Normally I wouldn't mind, but there's another interview I have I'm already late, so I'm just trying to let you know, so that don't come out as rude. No,
I appreciate. I really appreciate your time. Okay, well, we should wrap it up. So, Marek, thank you very much. Extraordinary conversation, extraordinary book. I beseech all of you listening or watching to go buy the book.
Thank you so much. So if you don't mind me adding this, all the revenue from publishing of this book, as well, all my speaking engagements, not related to my business, but related to this book, go to a charity, which I also launched, because at some point I realized that most of the charities run in a very, very bad way, to put it in the diplomatic words. So for anyone interested in more, just go to chasingblackunicorns.com, and that's where you have all the information about the book and myself, about the charity and everything that I do. And thank you so much for asking me all those questions. And I really enjoy touching new topics, because everyone is asking me about the book, and we're able to talk for a large portion about very interesting topics. So thank you for that.
Good. No problem, Marek. All right. Good. Off to your next podcast. And thanks once again. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much again. I hope we stay in touch, and speak soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Marek. Bye-bye.